Hello, this is Fam Electric Ghost. We have Doriene Marselje.
Yes, that's
Yes,
correct.
so I got your name right.
Yeah, you did actually.
I had looked it up.
And that's smart. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
the most easy or common last name.
Well, I've been interviewing indie artists or artists from around the world for the last 3 years. So I've actually talked to several artists from the Netherlands and Norway and
Ah,
Denmark.
good. Yeah, so
So
you've had your fair share of
yeah,
difficult names.
yeah. So I'll just give a little bio. I'm Fam Electric Ghost. I'm an electronic music producer and musician myself, and I've been interviewing indie artists from around the world since 2018 on Anchor FM, which is part of Spotify. And we've got about 23,000 listeners worldwide. And we like to talk to musicians from all genres. And you're the first classical musician we've been able to get on. So we're very excited that we're talking to you today.
I'm very
So,
flattered to be the first classical musician.
well, since I'm a synthesist, one thing I always do is like if you're a synthesist, what we do is we mimic other instruments. So I have
Right.
mimics of strings and flutes. I started as a clarinet player, and
Ah,
then
really?
I realized I couldn't write full songs just on my clarinet. So I got into synthesizers in my set when I was like 20 years old, and I'm in my 50s now. But yeah, I just you know I have an appreciation for all instruments because synthesis we try to replicate everything. So yeah, talking to somebody who uses the actual instrument, I'm always very excited to talk to guitar players. And you're a cello player, right?
I'm
Or a harp
harpist.
player.
Yes.
Yeah, harpist. Yeah, and a harpist. That's something I haven't used that many harps in some of my music. Maybe a couple of years ago, I did a rock opera where I had some,
Yeah.
but it's interesting. So we always like to ask questions that we sent you. Now, I do have some
Yeah.
information in your bio, but I'll start with the first question. When did you first get into music and at what age? I do have an answer, but I'll let you talk to it.
Well, I got into music, well, way before I started playing an instrument, actually, because I come from a very culturally engaged family, and so there was always music playing. My dad is a great fan of Frank Zappa and Pink Floyd, so he would be really into that experimental rock kind of music. And my mom always was listening to classical music, and there was a point, I think, when I heard the sound of the harp and I realized that's incredible. What is this? And then she took me to a concert as a 4-year-old, like a lunch concert, something quite short. And when I saw it, I was sold. That had to be, the thing I played. So I had to beg and beg. And finally, when I was 6, she brought me to music school. She thought I would find out that day that I was still too young or too short or small to play it.
Yeah, it's a pretty big
Yeah,
instrument.
but then in this music school, I got behind the instrument, and it was such a click with this instrument that the teacher said, "Please, can I keep her?" So yeah, that's how I started playing harp.
Wow, so you started really young because yeah, so that's awesome. So you went to a conservatory,
I
right?
went to the conservatory. Yes, I was in young talent uh, part of the conservatory since I was 9 years old, and then I went on to do my bachelor's and master's in the conservatory as well. Yeah.
So you won a festival, you won a young talent prize at the age of 7
Yeah.
before you even went to the
Yeah.
conservatory.
Yeah, well, I
That's
did have
awesome.
harp lessons, of course. I started having lessons when I was 6. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it went very quickly from that moment. And I think it's just because I don't have like stage parents, the ones, they were always a bit more like, please go play outside, go be with your friends,
Oh,
leave the harp
oh
alone
yeah.
for 5 minutes.
Oh, so they weren't like actor parents of
Not at
actors are
all.
kind of known for
No,
like really pushing.
no.
But it's good that you had the love for the instrument because when I've talked to lots of musicians, a lot of times, especially like I like to talk to indie musicians or musicians that aren't super mainstream but are working musicians, and you find that they just like are in love with their instrument.
Yeah.
They're in love with music, and they do it because they love it, not because they're making millions of dollars like a superstar, but because they just love the art,
Yeah.
and that's always good to talk to someone like that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, so you had some professors that you mentioned, like we went to for your bachelor's
Right.
degree at the conservatory. Ernestine Stoop,
Yeah,
as I said his name
I
right.
studied first with Erika Waardenburg, um,
Uh-huh.
and I continued studying with Ernestine Stoop.
So, okay, yeah, I got that
No, but that makes
one.
sense. And yeah, those were my two professors, and both of them gave me a lot. I think from the first one, I studied with her since I was 9. Um, and I did the first 2 years of my bachelor's with her, but then by that time I had been with her for 12 years, so I had to leave. But um, she taught me everything about the harp repertoire and about technique and how to actually be above your instrument, like play, understand it so well that you can play any music. And then when I went
Oh,
to
wow.
Ernestine, the other one, the second one, she is a more experimental harpist, and she was always um, I don't know if there must be also an expression in English for this, but we would say stay out of the lanes that are already paved. Like,
Oh, okay, that's cool. Well, that's kind of like you mentioned that your father was into
yeah,
Zappa. Like I'm a big, a lot of synthesis were experimental in our nature because electronic music was like one like first experimental types of
right.
music. And so when you mentioned like Zappa, I'm big into Zappa. I'm into progressive rock, into like Parliament Funkadelic. The whole idea of and bands like Sun Ra, or
Yeah,
like jazz outfits like Coltrane and Sun Ra.
yes.
I get drawn into that because I don't like, being a synthesist, I don't like to stay in a lane. And that's why I do like what I call expansive sound, where I bring in like anything from funk to classical to rock to jazz. And so it's interesting to talk to a classical musician that's talking like that because a lot of musicians, I kind of started doing classical as a wind instrument, as a
Yeah.
clarinet, and they kind of like to stay in their lane.
Yeah, that's also. I mean, that's actually what started to bother me a few years ago, because I am a classically trained, so I come from the same background as all of them, and I share this love for my instrument. It's the happiest relationship I've ever had, but it's not all there is, and I feel like a lot of classical musicians, without judging them, but this is just my opinion of how I experience it, is that that's all there is. And to me it's not. it's
Mhm.
it's it's great that you have a craft and that you have such a great understanding of your instrument, but that there's more that actually opens uh
Well, I'm always interested in musicians that are willing to cross into other
right.
genres because I think it kind of even pushes the genre you're
I
from,
think so too.
because if you're like, if I'm an experimental electronic musician and I'll go work with a jazz artist, that they'll probably say, well, you're not as disciplined, but experimental musicians can be just as disciplined as a classical musician. It's like, so this idea that like certain disciplines are more than
Yeah,
others, and then people can get that in their bones. A blues player can say, well, I'm a pure blues
yeah,
guitar player, and they have a certain opinion about that. And then a jazz player might think they have an opinion, and a classical guitarist is going to have a different opinion.
sure,
They're all guitar
yeah.
players, but they're all different lanes. And if you mix them, you can bring a lot of cool aspects. And I think that just pushes music forward. So it's cool to hear you
Yeah,
say
so I
that.
was really lucky. It was a great addition to my already yeah, to what I already knew as a harpist or a musician. So I learned to open up my mind, and also to look at other instrumentalists and what else is there, and yeah, like funny collaborations. I've done a lot of experimental music theater. I'm right
Hmm.
now
With
with visual
visual artists,
artists
like visual
also,
artists too. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, with spoken word artists, and having a lot of fun doing
Well, that's
that,
great.
because it makes me more creative and it makes me more flexible, and it inspires me a lot actually to work with different disciplines.
But I think it gets you to a wider audience because it's like a niche market for
Also,
classical
yeah.
musicians, and you can make a living and you could do very well. But then the whole world might not know. If you go and you work with a more popular musician or an experimental
Right.
musician, you get into that other lane, you get a whole nother audience.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know,
So, for instance, last year I've been touring with the Beatles cover band called the Analogs. They're Dutch, but they're doing really well, and um,
awesome.
they needed me for just one song in their "She's Leaving Home" and from the Sgt. Pepper album. But it was, I
Hmm.
mean, it's the easiest music I've ever played for harp. But being part of such a nice tour with always sold out venues in Europe is incredible. It's a lot of fun. It's a different energy. I want to experience that too.
Yeah, that's like you see a lot of bands like I think Trans Siberian Orchestra.
Right.
They kind of mix rock with classical, and it's been a tradition even in heavy metal. There's a lot of like the scales that the guitar players play are more classical based than jazz or
Yeah.
blues based, and so there's been that kind of mixing of genres, even though maybe the rock fans didn't know it. um, that's what is actually going
Yeah.
on, but it's kind of cool to see where you're going with it because I think the harp is an awesome instrument. And like I said, I used it like a synthesized like Roland harp that came off of like one of their Phantoms or something. But I used it in a rock opera I wrote because I needed a classical instrument. And I said, well, I wanted to use that because it had a certain tone.
Yeah.
Certain tones you want to pull like a cello or a violin or a certain type of piano. And it's interesting, like synthesizer players, sometimes we'll get these like synthesizers that can model a piano where I can actually lift the lid and I can say how high the lid is,
That's so nice.
or
That's incredible.
I can tune every note, and so I can get very detailed. That would be kind of things that classical musicians would appreciate. They wouldn't think that we do that, but we do.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, no, I'm well
um,
aware. A good friend of mine is has a ton of synthesizers, and it's incredible to see what you can do with these instruments.
yeah, so that's cool. It's like one of the things I always ask about. So your influences as a classical musician, can you kind of tell our audience like who inspires you? Because they might not know within the world of the harp, like who are the like great players of the harp that you might have been influenced by, or do you have like your reference points? I always ask this of all my musicians that I
Yeah,
talk
well,
to.
honestly, so I am not the kind of person that becomes a fan of someone, but of course there's people. When I was growing up and wanting to get all into the harp, of course I had some great examples like Jana Bushkova and Xavier de Maistre. They were great names that inspired me as a young girl wanting to excel in the harp. But then later on, it's not necessarily a person or something that influences me. I think it's I'm just always looking for to find a better way to use my instrument to express myself or the idea that I want to get across. So it can be really anything that moves or inspires me. Like can be music, but
Oh, so
fashion,
or
literature, or
or
a beautiful
poetry or
exhibition, but also a
movies or
sunset, or I don't know, a bird.
oh, okay.
So
That's interesting because like poets will say that, like a poet or a writer. Like a writer, they typically will say something that, it doesn't. It's more
yeah, yeah,
esoteric.
you know what inspires
It's
me
like
is like if I feel I get a glimpse of an emotion or a mental place I couldn't visit or get to without that thing, like this sunset or this movie, or
mhm.
and if it opens kind of a new universe that I cannot quite put my fingers on, but for a moment it's there and I'm there.
Yeah.
That's really what inspires me and also drives me as a musician to create.
I think one cool thing I read about was like Jimi Hendrix. They asked him about Electric Ladyland, and people were saying, "Well, how do you get these sounds?" And he's like, "What's a sound painting?" And then people didn't really understand what he was talking about. But it's like he was creating sounds on his guitar that were kind of ahead of
That's
synthesizers,
yeah,
and he was doing things where he was getting like ocean
yeah,
waves and birds and all this atmospheric stuff to come out of his guitar on
that
command
yeah,
because he had learned how to do it. And so that always interested me because I said, well, that's a way to think about music. Is like you think about it visually,
Yeah.
like synesthesia. You know, you think about it that it's actually come from emotion, it's coming from smell, it's
Yes,
coming from
exactly.
sight, from sound. It's like a painter, you know. And it's a different way of thinking because it's not, oh, what scale did you use? What this, you know, who did? Are you doing some kind of Dylan? Are you doing some kind of Hendrix? Well, I'm doing something because I felt something in the
Obviously, those
force.
people are all incredible creators. Also, like Björk, for instance,
Yeah,
I think she's incredible too.
yeah,
And they inspire me. The way they, but because of the way they think about music or the way they create.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I've always been very inspired by like field recordings or people that take poetry, you know, poetry slams or kind of experimental jazz fusion,
right.
you know, anybody that just said, well, I'm just going to. And the interesting thing I like to always note is the Robert Moog, who created the Moogs, said that when he created them, he felt like he tapped into the universe.
Right.
And as an engineer, he said, I felt like I was tapping something that was a universal, like muse. And as an engineer, I was tapping into it. And you know, most like guys who are engineers aren't going to talk like that. And I always thought that that was very interesting, and that's why I have a lot of
Yeah.
Moogs. But they just have a feel that feels like a real instrument. You know, it doesn't just feel like a machine. It feels like there's somebody that felt something that made
I
this
think
machine,
it's the
and they're made by
last
hand.
incredible
Yeah,
development
yeah,
in musical instruments, I think.
yeah. It's just they can feel like I've got like Moogs I've got from different years. They're like guitars. Like a 74 mini Moog will sound different than a 72.
Yeah, so
And you're like, why? It's just like the way like a Strat, like a Fender Strat or a Telecaster from a certain year has a certain tone because the way it's built. It's the same thing with these synths because they're not digital, they're
exactly.
hand built. They have
Exactly.
character, and that is something that most people would think, well, how can an electronic music instrument have character? But
Yeah,
it
it's
can't.
because a lot of
Um,
craft went into this, and there's a lot of, I mean, it's a complicated instrument actually.
Yeah. So, like in terms of your harps, I've never really talked to someone that had a harp before. Is like there's certain types of harps that you look for that you're going to play. That you go to certain manufacturers
Yes.
or instrument creators. That there's certain things you look for as a musician on a harp. What are those things that you look for when you go to
Well, you
select
have
your
a
instrument?
few big manufacturers: the Salvi is Italian, Line and Healy, American, Kamak from France. I play a Line and Healy. And my reason to choose this instrument was because it's one of the, I think it's the only manufacturer that still um, crafts all of the parts of the instrument manually. And I think you can tell. So they are all of different kind of beautiful qualities. I mean, they're expensive instruments and they're all very well made. But you can tell. So it feels a bit more personal when you pick an instrument. So I bought my harp, this one that I have now, 2.5 years ago. And it
Mm-hmm.
spoke to me because it was a match in the way it was built and in the way it sounds to my playing.
Do they customize them for your
No,
body? I mean, do you actually get them built for your arm
no, they
length
are
or your height,
standardized.
or
Yeah, they don't
they
do
don't
that.
do that? It's standard. Like they
No, they
don't
don't
have
do
that.
that. I mean, you can ask it, but I think you'll have to come up with a lot of money for them to do it.
To do that, that would be kind of crazy.
Yeah, because of course they produce an amount of harps according to their catalog or something like this, and to what they usually sell. They have standard models.
Okay, and then you can customize it to a certain degree.
If you want, yeah, but you'll pay. So
Yeah, pay. So you take the standard. You don't customize. You take the standard
no,
rate.
usually people don't customize their harps because they're usually just really great as they are, I
The
think.
greater they are. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. So so we talked about your writing style. When you write your music, like you're writing your own pieces, right? Or are you taking like standard classical pieces when you perform?
Well, so I actually started a new project with my brother and a colleague of his. They are industrial designers. We were supposed to premiere on the 1st of April, but we all
Okay.
know with the
Yeah.
Corona situation.
Yeah.
So we postponed everything because we already found out at the beginning of March that we couldn't do anything. But we are working on an interactive light installation.
Oh, cool.
And so I will use already existing pieces by Berio and Takemitsu, for instance.
Hmm.
And I'm using effects, and I found this great semi-analog synthesizer, the Squaver from Sonic Smith.
Oh, okay. I know who they are. Yep.
And I'm using those, the effects, like the ring modulator.
Oh, so you're
And
actually using a ring modulator in the synth like an effect pedal?
yes,
That's
exactly.
cool.
So yeah, so I'm using those to write kind of my own compositions, but I mainly play existing music for now. I
Mhm.
just started getting into writing my own music, so it's quite new, and I can't wait to actually try it out, but I have to wait a bit longer.
That's interesting. There's a lot of cool techniques. I love people don't realize that guitar players like Pete Townsend is famous for using an ARP 2600 on the song "Who Are You." He used that instrument has the ability to do something called
I should
basically
check that out.
it had a thing called sample and hold. What basically that means is it's a random volt generator that creates a randomization. So if you run your guitar through it, it creates this randomization that comes from. So you could play a pattern on your guitar, but it'll get randomized through the synth.
You have to
And
tell me
then
what it's called.
what ARP 2600 is a famous modular synthesizer that was created by an American company, and famous
Great.
people from like Parliament Funkadelic used it.
Ah, yeah.
Pete Townsend used it. A lot of famous musicians, like a lot, Yes used it. A lot of great progressive synth bands used it, funk bands used it, but
Hmm.
it had a couple capabilities where it could actually take in guitar input, and people used like the random volt generator, and they used the envelope follower to actually enhance their sound. And it's kind of famous that the "Who Are You" song from Pete Townsend. It sounds like it's a synthesizer because it is, but it's his actual guitar going through the synth that creates this kind of interval going up and down kind of interval thing that you hear. That sounds like it's a pattern off of a sequencer, but it's
That's it.
actually him playing the guitar through the synth.
That is very cool. I'm gonna check it out. I just wrote it down.
Yeah, they actually reissued the ARP 2600, like Korg, actually reissued a full analog version of it. So it's been, the older versions of
Ah,
it were sitting around it was made from the 70s and up until the 80s, and then they stopped making them. There's like maybe 10,000 of them sitting around, but
wow.
there's a brand new one that is modeled off of the original. And it's very cool because it was used by a lot of really interesting artists used it for the fact that you could. One of the famous artists that used it was actually a filmmaker, and the voice of R2D2 from Star Wars
You
is
know, I have
actually.
to admit that I have never seen a Star Wars movie.
Well, if you ever saw Star Wars, there's a little robot creature that's the one that's by the gold one. The one that looks like a humanoid,
Yeah,
and then the other one's like R2D2 is like a little like
yeah.
trash can like
I know
one.
what it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, that sound of his voice comes from the ARP 2600
Ah, that's
using
incredible.
the random volt generator on a voice. The guy, the director, the sound engineer took a microphone and ran the microphone through the synth, and then used that envelope flower to create that random sound that sounds like a robot talking. That
That's
all comes
incredible.
from. There's a lot of cool things you can do with that if you take synths. Like I have a mode that has a real physical spring reverb. And if you run a guitar through it, you get a physical string reverb like a guitar pedal.
Oh wow.
But then you also have access to the whole workflow of the synth. So then you could use the ladder filter, you can use the envelope generators, you can do all this cool stuff. So it's interesting that you was talking about using a synth because there's a lot of cool stuff you can use in the synthesizers. You can use the envelopes, you can use the filters,
Yeah, I still have
you
to
can
get
use.
way more familiar with it because
Yeah,
I didn't realize, but it's far more complicated than I thought it would be.
yeah,
It's actually learning a new
yeah. There's a
instrument,
lot of sound.
and
There's a lot of subtractive sound synthesis you can do to your sound. You can
yeah.
like turn it inside
But
out.
that's actually what makes it so exciting because I thought, I was very frustrated about 2 years ago or a year ago talking to my friend who is the owner of these million synthesizers about the limitations of my instrument. I thought, okay, I know exactly what I like about it, but now I'm stuck. And he told me, no, you don't have to be. Wait a minute.
No, you could do a lot of cool things. There's a lot
Yeah.
of cool things with like Moog had a pedal system, bass pedal system called a Taurus, and you can actually use it as it's actually a pedal synthesizer that you can use your feet
You're
and
right.
you can connect it to a string instrument, and then when you press the pedals, it actually goes through a synthesizer, and then it allows you to manipulate it. Like if you were playing a piano or you use the foot pedals, you can go and assign those foot pedals to different aspects of the synth. And I've seen a lot
Oh,
of guitar
wow.
players and bass players do that to add, really big depth to what they're doing, so they can actually kick off like something that sounds like a pad of strings off of a guitar. And you're like, wow, how do
Ah.
they do that? And it's like, what? Right? Yeah, there's a lot of cool things you
You
can do.
should tell me more about
You get
this.
into it.
This should be an interview the other way
Yeah.
around.
Well, that's one thing about being an electronic musician. We love doing different things. That's what we like to
Right.
do.
Yeah, because I have
Um,
played around with the Mooger Fooger.
oh yeah, those are
I
cool. Yeah,
loved it.
those are awesome.
This random delay was incredible. I think I've never heard something so cool before.
Yeah, similar. Yeah, that's a really cool device. A lot of people look for those all the
Yeah.
time. You're kind of highly known by all kinds of musicians use them.
Ugh.
Filmmakers love them. They love, like, composers like to use those a lot because they can do a lot of cool things with that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's really cool.
it's interesting. So if you said you did some collaborations with like audio visual that you're getting ready to work on for like an installation, but they got put off by the whole
Yeah.
coronavirus. Have you thought about working with any other musicians from like different genres? Like all the different genres are out there, like like an EDM or a trance or a hip hop or experimental electronic. Have you thought about doing that
Yeah, I
deeper?
have, but I've never. I mean, I have actually also worked sometimes with a EDM producer and also um, with singers with other genres outside of classical music, but I've never actually gone deeper into it because for some reason we always get stuck somewhere. But I would love to do something with hip hop.
That's
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, there's a lot of cool things between like K-pop and
yeah,
J-pop and EDM and trance, industrial. Like I'm all over the map. I like hitting everything.
yeah. Because
You know,
I'm crazy about hip hop, and I think there's a lot of cool songs that actually have harp samples in them.
oh yeah, they mean hip hop artists will sample everything. They'll sample classical.
Yeah,
They'll sample Bach, they'll Beethoven and Chopin, whatever they can
right.
get. And
Let's take something out of it.
they've
And I
been
thought,
known for taking like
this is really cool. And so the harp doesn't have to be such a. It can also be a
yeah.
really cool instrument.
Yeah, a guy like Kendrick Lamar, he would probably be big time into that because he samples like Coltrane, he
Yeah,
samples like
exactly.
Sun Ra, and he samples a lot of really interesting
Yeah,
jazz. And yeah, the tone of your instrument really could work with experimental hip hop. Guys who are pushing it. And there's a lot of like underground hip hop bands in New York that love kind of cross genre mixing. They're always looking for different sounds, and they're starting to open up with a lot of hip hop bands before the whole shutdown.
right.
I've been seeing hip hop bands that were actually playing with full live bands that actually had jazz
I think
musicians
really Kendrick
playing with
Lamar
them.
might have made a little change there, right? Because his
Yeah,
the album from 2015, I think it was the.
yeah. He actually has a full band. When he performs, he has like jazz drummers and horn players and keyboard players. He
Nice.
actually plays his stuff
It's a
live.
new take on hip hop after the late 90s, 2000s, I think. It,
Well, it's cool because like it gets limiting if you just have a CDJ and you're running
yeah,
off like in a Kai MPC or something. Like you use a sequencer, that's cool. But what they're starting to find out is like, well, I'm a live performer, and it's the dynamics of having a musician on stage with you, having a real live drummer. There's things that you can
yeah,
do that you can't do with a drum
yeah.
machine, and they're starting to realize that. And the more and more hip hop bands are bringing in real bass players, bringing in real guitar players, not just sampling it, but actually having them play the
Right.
parts, and that is opening things up to be
Well,
a whole
then of
new
course, I
like
mean,
era.
that's what sets apart a live performance from playing a CD, I think.
Oh yeah, because I mean you got a different audience. I think there's an audience that's like the dance
Yeah.
audience. They just want to dance and they want to have the kind of known sound of something that's going to be on the
Constant, yeah.
beat. But if there's a different fan that wants to see a band play, you know, like somebody wanted to see the Who or the Beatles, or they want to see
Yeah.
like a real band, and seeing this kind of hybrid thing that Kendrick was doing is kind of grabbing that audience, you know, that wants to see a live rock band. They said, "Oh wow, this hip band, how band actually
Yeah,
plays," you know, and they kind of get interested, and they get a wider audience, get more
exactly.
people to want to see them. It's like a dance club is only so big, but a stadium is more oriented toward live performance.
True, that's true. Yeah,
so so like you've played live because that's the nature of your business, your art.
right.
So when you're live playing, I've seen like on your uh, you played in Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, France, Ireland, UK. So you done, yeah, you're on Dutch national TV. You're on MPO4
Right.
radio. So you've been out there with your art in a big way as a classical musician. You're a little bit more, you know, like known based on your
Yeah.
performances.
I mean, yeah,
That's cool. So do you get any pushback from other art? Like sometimes you get people in a genre or in art, like if you get like a painter, they're like, well, I'm only doing galleries and I'm only going to do fine art and I'm not going to do any commercial art. And do you get that within your genre where people say, well, I'm not doing anything that's like commercial.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
staying within the fine.
especially classical musicians are so elitist and snobs, and I will. I mean, I've done my fair share of snobism as well. So we will say no. Commercial stuff is the worst. You're selling your soul to the devil. How can you? No, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think we're a bit past that. Also, at least I am way past that, and. I get asked for people know me to be loud and very expressive with my music. So it doesn't matter if you put me in if you make me play a classical program, or if you let me do my own more experimental contemporary music. People know what they're gonna hear, and I hope that's also the way I engage with them because of the sound I can produce. And um, yeah, pushback. No, I think yeah, I'm sure people have their opinions, but also I can't be bothered.
Yeah, so I've seen that you actually have like a duo with your
Yeah,
sister,
true.
right?
That's true.
And then you also you work with other musicians and chamber ensembles,
Yes,
right?
I do it all. I mean, I enjoy it all. So
Yeah,
also with my new project, once it starts taking off, and I hope sooner than later, but let's see what Corona has planned for us.
yeah,
I will still play classical music and chamber music and orchestra music, but I really want to contribute something to the development of the repertoire and to the development of the instrument and the way we view uh, or the way my
well, I
typical
think
audience
yeah.
views classical music.
I think it would be really cool to see your instrument go through a big like Moog, like a Model
Yeah.
55, the kind that Keith Emerson used, these gigantic like modulars. Um, you know, even if you could go through an ARP 2600, which is more like a smaller version of that, but that would be really cool visually to see. And the big thing in electronic music is like modulars or
Yes.
Eurorack, where guys in Germany and Berlin and in New York, in Los Angeles, they go to these small shows and they have these modular synths, and it's kind of like free jazz.
Yes.
You just go with your modular synth and you play with. You have poets do spoken word over it. You have other musicians like bass players and stuff come in and jam with you, and you're I think classical musicians going into that would be really cool. If you actually had somebody playing like your instrument, with somebody doing that, I think that would be really
I think so too.
exciting.
It would be
So
harp 4.0, right? Right? I think that would be
yeah, it show a whole new generation your instrument. and different ways to appreciate it other than being in a chamber choir,
Exactly.
or a chamber
Or
ensemble.
being
Yeah,
a
I think it
beautiful
just,
instrument in the back of an orchestra. I think it's time for a little development. I'm jealous at the pace of technology. It moves much slower in music, but I think yeah, at least I want to try to contribute to that.
that'd be awesome. Like when things get opened up again and we can see those kind of live performances. In between that, what I've been doing is I've been doing like collaborations like through the net.
Ah, yeah,
So I, yeah, 'cause I have a home studio. So I'll work with a musician in LA. I'll work with somebody in Norway. You know, I'm working now with this like an Italian musician where I'm working on a project through like a music gateway project, and I'm actually putting down my parts on a album that he's had me
that's
working on. So
great.
even though we're kind of stuck in our homes, one advantage of being an electronic musician, we kind of build our own
Yeah, totally.
recording
And of course, I
studios.
think this is the first time, anyway. I don't know if you experience it the same way, that everybody has as a free agenda, open agenda, and actually these collaborations are easier to make them happen now. And
Oh yeah, because everybody's got their Ableton or they got their Pro Tools, and then you've got like a guy like me. I'm a hardware guy, so I've got hardware recorders.
oh wow,
I've got like, and then I kind of capture things live. So I do a little different. I don't have like MIDI. I have the ability to do MIDI stuff, but I tend to like to do it on my hardware recorders.
yeah,
And then I'll have stems, but they're wave stems. They're not MIDI instructions. And one of the reasons I do that is because I actually want the sound of my Moog to kind of be set in stone.
ah yes, of course, I can
If I
imagine.
just send you, if I send you a MIDI, then you're going to take that MIDI instruction and put it to a different instrument or a different sound, and it might not be the sound that I wanted. And so I kind of control what
Exactly.
the sound's going to be by forcing you to use my
Yeah.
Moog. So when I work with somebody, they're not just get a MIDI instruction that they can bring into a different instrument. They get the bass line that I picked that tone, and
No,
that's
but
the tone I
I think,
wanted.
of course, that has to do with your artistry, like how you view. You choose these things for a reason. So
Yeah, well, I think that puts me like I can understand like an instrument, a musician like yourself, because the tone of your harp, that's what it is. It's not like a MIDI instruction that you can throw into Ableton.
true.
It's how you played it. It's how you played it, and then the tone of it is like your instrument speaking through you, and you don't want to just shift that into a MIDI
No.
instruction, because then you
Yeah,
lose.
the character and
And
yeah.
that's part of one of the problems of modern music is some people just think the tones are just you can just let the producers change them,
Right.
and that's fine. But I just don't like my producers
No,
changing.
because you write it with the reason. Or you
Yeah. The reason why you do it, like I guess it depends on what you want to do. Like I have a certain what I want to get across, and some people are willing to say, "Well, I'll let the
sure.
producer do it." It's kind of like how much control do you want the producer to have versus you as a
Yeah.
musician to have over
Yeah.
what you're doing. Um, so I think that's just like some people don't care about it as much, and other people care a lot about
Yeah.
it. um, so what I see that you do have music on Spotify. You do have music on the streaming services that are
Yeah,
out
it's
there. I
an
see there's
album I
music on
recorded a
Spotify
couple of years ago
specifically.
that I just had to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
29. Yeah,
Bi-
yeah. So when you record, do you go to a physical
yes.
studio and use because to capture your instrument, you have to mic it. You would have to mic it like an acoustic guitar or something,
Yeah,
right?
more like a piano, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have a lot of different mics in your instrument. Do you have to have a lot of different mics around it? You just use like you have different mics at different heights to
Yeah,
capture how it sounds.
I don't so I'm so sorry I cannot describe the mics by name because I don't know much about microphones. But there were yeah, so there's like to capture the acoustics of the venue or the studio wherever it is. Usually I pick a studio also that will go great with the instruments because it's you want the sound box to get a bit of
Yeah, so you
room.
got to
Yeah.
have it's really important for you to have a room that's known for certain acoustic
Yeah.
characteristics right? So that your instrument gets
Yeah.
picked up right.
Although for my new project, I wouldn't do that. I'm also going to record music that I'm writing and using. I will record it on CD, but I want more of a real sound, the one that I hear up close. So I don't want it to sound like over acoustic. Actually, I want it to be a bit more dry. So it's a choice. But for this specific
Well,
album, it was a 20th century, very classical CD that I recorded just because it's this music that kept following me, and I wanted to get rid of it. So I thought I'd just record it, and maybe I'm done with it.
put it down. Well, that's cool. We're going to put the link to that because we have
Oh,
a link
thank you.
to your main website, and we're going to put the link to that album. And then, yeah, we're going to put a bunch of links that come from your
Thank
main
you.
website. We have that ability to do
That's
that.
great.
And because we're a partner with Spotify, we can link their stuff specifically, but we can also put other links in there that aren't Spotify.
That's great.
So, yeah, that's good. Well, you don't want to just only do that. I know they would probably want me to just do that. But yeah. So you're what do you think about the current state of the music industry? Like being a musician as like yourself, how much do you really depend on streaming services versus like actually physically playing like venues? It would seem like in your business you probably aren't as focused on it as like the more popular genres. But how do you view like the streaming services?
Well, honestly, I think the streaming services, I think music is made for people, so it should be accessible for people also, to people. And to that point, I think it's actually great that it exists. I don't use it much, so I have one CD on Spotify, and I think it's also on a few other platforms, but because I haven't recorded that much yet, I'm not so familiar with, I don't know, like the compensation or transparency of their policies.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's one of the big problems for like most of the musicians in the indie space, like the alternative rock and musicians like myself. One of the problems, I mean, the cool thing about streaming, it gets a
Yeah.
worldwide audience where, I've been able to talk to people in Amsterdam, people in Japan,
Right.
in Australia, all these places I would have never
Yeah,
reached before.
that's great. Of course, you can expand your audience.
I think that's the big point. But the bad point is kind of like radio in the 70s, where it's an advertisement capability, but you don't necessarily get compensated at the level that you would off of like a vinyl CD or a CD.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems with it, is that the compensation level, a lot of bands have to physically, and in this coronavirus era, that's a big problem for a lot of, bands.
Yes.
Is the bands I talk to, like the only way they get money is to do the physical show.
Yes, same for me. It's 80% of my income is doing concerts.
Yeah, and selling merch. I mean, the weird thing today, it's kind of like a thing that I've talked to other musicians about, is the devaluation of music as a commodity. Not that you want it to be a commodity, but in the 70s, you want to buy a Led Zeppelin album, you had to buy it on vinyl or 8-track. So you had to buy it. You couldn't really hear it. You hear it on the radio, but if you want to own it, you had to buy it. Now you can get it for like 0.06 of a penny on the street. And the problem with that is, kids will buy an Xbox video game for $60, but they won't pay $10 for a band that
they love to listen to. Also, they love it.
They listen to it. Yeah, and they won't. Yeah, and they won't buy it. And it's like, so it's like, how do you get that video game generation that will spend all that money on the video game to go back and buy the records? And that's been the hard thing, that the record industry hasn't found a way to convert or figure out how to get a decent level of compensation for what the work that musicians do. And it really is going to be a big problem in this era.
Yeah.
If we're locked down for 18 months,
because who knows?
Some bands might not make it. It might not make, back to be musicians. They might not be able
I see
to do
people
it.
around me already after it's been 7 or 8 weeks now here, I think. I see people around me looking into what are the skills they have, and maybe developing something else or learning a new skill, and and just quitting music altogether because it's never been a great income or because they are completely desperate with the future.
Yeah, and I think that's just sad that that the music, everybody loves music, but they don't really understand that you need to get paid for what
Yeah.
you do. Not that you want to be a
So
millionaire, but they need to be able to way to
yeah,
make
to
a
that
good
point, I'm
living.
also kind of annoyed with all the live streaming concerts. First of all, there was
Mm-hmm.
so much output in the first few weeks of Corona and in very poor quality that I didn't want to watch anything. But also, I think, yeah, if you're going to offer everything you're doing and have worked for so hard for free, what do you expect people want after this period? I mean, how do we get back to?
Yeah, you gotta be. Well, they gotta be careful because I mean, I think it's the whole thing where bands are hoping that people will go buy their merch
Yeah.
or they'll go buy their physical CD. But if you give them too much live, they won't.
No, exactly.
so so that's been the kind of rub is like giving all this stuff away for free has gotten people used to saying, well, I don't have to pay for it because I could go on YouTube and
Yeah.
just listen to it. And so even if you put a donate button, like what's been going on is like Spotify and SoundCloud are putting donation buttons, but people are like, well, why am I going to hit that when I can just play it for
Yeah,
free?
so
And they're still not putting any money.
no, I don't. I think it should come from other places than only the audience. I think performing live for people will never really disappear, but I wonder how long it will take for people to actually want to go and show up at concerts en masse again in big groups. And
That's been a big problem. So if you can, the way to kind of do it online is you got to have a quality
yeah,
performance and find a way to ticket people. And
yeah,
actually, there are capabilities to create tickets, and you got to create something that would be worth somebody paying that ticket for.
yeah.
But
So don't do it
that's
from
what
your living room.
musicians are
I cannot
going to
perform
have to do that.
from my living room, for instance. I don't. That doesn't feel like a concert to me. So if I will do any, I mean, I did one live stream concert and it was really nice because it was in a studio, so it sounded great and it felt like a lot of fun. But it's also super strange. I really miss the interaction with the audience. I,
Yeah, I think as a musician, that's what's a hard thing. The feedback that a guitar player or a person like yourself gets off of
yes,
the audience kind of feeds the performance. And I've played in New York City, and like it is playing in my bedroom studio, I can't get that feedback.
no,
From the audience, like in Manhattan. If I'm in a Manhattan club, like it equivalent to like a CBGB's or something
right.
there's different clubs in Manhattan. If you're playing with the audience, like you do your solo on your mini moog, kind of like because the people are giving you this
Yeah,
reaction, and you go somewhere you might
exactly.
not have gone based on how people are
Yeah, so
behaving.
it won't fully
And
replace everything, but you're right. There's ways to get to buy tickets for live streams, but I just yeah, I think it should be a temporary way to still bring art and music to people's homes and to not completely feel like you're disappearing, but it should definitely not become new standard this way.
well, yeah, and the other thing, being the type of musician I am, I can work on other people's
Yeah,
projects
in your
or
studio.
get paid. Yeah, do stuff where I put bass lines on something or
Mm,
pads on something or I run something through my Moog that they can't do. So I run a vocal through the Moog, and then I'm able
yeah,
to give them something they can't get. And so that's what you can do. You kind of farm your services out. That you can work on different
right.
projects. Um, be able to be more collaborative and more open to different things. Because now you're working with somebody else's project and they want this and they want that. So you have to be like working with a
Yeah,
band.
exactly. Yeah, probably.
So you can't just do what you want. You have to be in tune with what the
Yeah,
project is. Um, it's a different way of behaving when you're doing your own
I'm sure.
project. So only certain people are capable of doing that because they kind of like, well, I'm not really a team player. um, it's a different type of
Yeah.
things going on. So, so what kind of resources are available to you in this era right now? Like if your project's on hold, you're working on other things, or you're finding other ways to be creative?
Resources in the sense of how do I, get by financially?
Yeah, well, maybe as a musician, are you able to get by as a musician right now, or are
Well,
you having to pull into
no,
other
I'm
things?
still trying as a musician. As far, I mean, I'm working in my studio, which is not a recording. I don't have a studio set up, but it's a workspace. I'm here every day. I'm trying to improve my program, the one that I told you about with the installation, because I have time now. So I'm trying to. I want to learn how to use Ableton, for instance. I'm trying to improve my skill set as well, but because I want to.
Well, that's cool. So you want to start putting down projects,
Yeah,
like
I
your
want
own projects,
to
and then
be
use a
more
DAW
equipped
to
to
capture
do exactly
your
what I
art.
want to do with the harp. So for that, it's a great moment, I think. Otherwise, I wouldn't have so much time. Although,
You might not have thought
no,
about
I would
doing
have
that,
asked
right?
help
If you
instead.
weren't put in a situation, you would have just gone to
Yeah, I
somebody
would have
else's
asked help.
studio,
Yeah,
right? And
but now actually I get to
so
learn
now I
something.
think
So
I've talked
that's
to.
also really good. And I usually work better with a deadline.
Yeah,
But
I'm hearing more. Yeah, that's cool. Well, yeah, the deadline kind of forces you to get stuff done, and then when you don't have a deadline, you
yeah,
kind
but
of go.
so I'm trying to put my own deadlines, and I have this new collaboration with the spoken word, the poet, and with the
Well, that's cool.
Iranian musician. We're setting up something for next season, 2021. So that's something to look forward to. And in the
That's
meantime, what the
awesome.
Dutch government here has decided to support freelancers with the minimum income for 3 months, which is great, but it's going to be 6 months minimum. So 3 months.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in the same situation. The U.S. government is giving us money for like 4 months, but then they're saying that we probably can't do anything for
Yeah.
like six
Yeah,
months.
they have already decided here. Last
So,
week they
so
had a
that
press conference and they said until the 1st of September there's no concert or events. And
yeah,
but after that also I still have some concerts left in November and October and December, but I'm not sure if they're going to take place in.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, the problem what we have here is they're telling us based on the 1918 pandemic that it tends
yeah,
to come back
right,
right in
in
that
autumn, a
period.
second wave.
And
Yeah,
so we're being told, yeah, we're getting told by a lot of venues in Boston and New York, and I live in the Northeast. They're like, well, they don't think they're open
right.
until
Yeah,
2021.
this concert season
So,
is finished.
so most of them are,
Oh,
yeah. So we're kind of like, I don't know, I don't think
no.
those places are going to open. Um, so then everything's switching to a lot of bands I've talked to are like, oh, I'm going to learn Ableton the way I said I was going to try, but because I was doing all these shows, I never really
Yeah.
sat down and did it. And people are trying to learn how to be their own recording engineer, which is kind of like, okay, hit or miss. But because a lot of people are like, that's an art in itself. And I think what happens, like if you're an electronic musician, you tend to learn how to do it because your
Yes,
instruments
of
kind of
course.
require it. Um, but if you're like a band, like a guitar band, you don't have to do that. You can go to a studio, you can get a real recording engineer. But electronic musicians, we're kind of better suited because a lot of the gear we use ends up
Right,
having those kind of processors on it because we're kind of already in
right.
that position. So it's easier for me to
Oh
do
yeah, for
that
me it
than
feels like
somebody
learning a
else. But
completely different skill instrument. I don't At first I don't understand anything. I watch tutorials endlessly and then I still don't understand terms, but I hope to at some point understand it out of context and then be able to use it.
yeah,
But I'm having fun. I mean,
yeah, it's really cool.
I
I mean,
would rather do this than when I look at some of my colleagues who are just taking this as a long holiday and be lazy about it or just complain about it. I would rather come out with 3 new projects
yeah, I
and
mean,
having
I do a
I don't know, an understanding my Squaver and Ableton. I don't know.
well, I think it's cool. I think it's really cool. I've found some other musicians are like, okay, I'm a guitar player. I'm gonna learn the
Yeah,
bass. So they had a bass around. It's like, well, I'm gonna focus on my bass playing and see if I can do that. Because that's gonna help me if I want to do a project. Then I can just kind of put the bass down. I can put the guitar down. I can get it all
yeah,
done myself. So, the same thing with guys who are like, oh, I want to learn how to do some drums. So now they got the time to sit down and
yeah,
try to learn the drums. And so I think like a lot of musicians I've talked to are like, okay, well, I'm going to try to hone my craft. I'm
Yeah,
going to try to get
exactly.
better. And so they're taking it as time to like that time you said you
So
always
better
wanted, now
start
you
doing
have it.
something with.
So just don't
Exactly.
sit
Well,
and
I
watch
can
Netflix.
watch a series. I don't have the. I used to be able really good, really able to watch series endlessly, but I feel like no, I'm never gonna get this time again in my lifetime. Hopefully, so much extra time that I didn't think
Yeah.
I would ever have. I'm gonna use it the best way I can.
Yeah. I just started diving down into my modes, which I already do. And I started doing all this like interconnectivity between all my stuff through controlled voltage. And like, it looks like a telephone system with the wires all over
That's so
it.
cool.
So like, because we can kind of rewire our synth. So I started watching all these tutorials from all these people from like Moog and Prophet and Roland. And like, okay, well, you can do this. You can go and get this like really interesting kick drum if you run your synthesizer through this, or you can get a really good pad. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn more techniques on how to do stuff and just dive down. So I just kind of set time every day to do
That
more
must be
sound design.
incredible.
Not even going. Yeah, well, sound design is one of the things about a synthesizer. You can just sit there and do sound design rather than even playing. You can spend time
Yeah,
trying to build your
that's
sounds, and that's an art in itself. And then from there, from building a sound, then you can take that sound that will drive you to build a new song, because it's like, oh, I got this new sound I never
but
had
that
before.
sounds
Now
like a
what should I
dream to
do with
me.
that?
That's I
And
really
so
should
that
get into synthesizers.
Yeah, if you're into that, that's what I think the big thing about synthesizers, if you've never been into it, is the
That's
fact that you
incredible
can
to
create
me.
your own
That's
tone
the
and it's
dream.
yours,
Yeah.
and that's what drives you as a songwriter. So I'm a songwriter, and then I don't have to buy
Right.
somebody's pad. I don't have to pay for a subscription service. I just go to my Moog, and every day I can get it
Yeah,
to
that's
generate
incredible.
different tones. And so that is the ultimate when you're a keyboardist. If you're sticking with some of the old keyboards that just setting based and they got set sounds, these other synths that can create the tones, that's the whole
Right.
that's the whole deal. I mean, that's what drove me when I was like 18 years old to go grab an old like
Right.
Jupiter. Was a famous like Roland synth. The reason I liked it, because people said, well, I don't know what the settings are. I said, well, there's no, it has no existing pads. You had to create the pad. People were like, some of my friends were like, well, I can't play that, and because I don't know what it's
Yeah.
going to do. And I was like,
Yeah,
well, that's the
that's
point.
incredible to me.
And so that's been my whole life with synthesizers, is the fact that it doesn't save it on the types I use is the whole point of like why you do it, is that
Yeah.
every day you create new tones. So yeah, so if you're really into like mixing that with your harp and getting into that, you'll find yourself like going into
Oh,
whole new
I'm afraid
frontiers, which
it
I'll be
will.
really
It
interested to
sounds
hear.
like an endless universe. That I mean, a very expensive one, also, by the way.
Yeah, you don't want to go down the rabbit hole because you
No,
won't get back
that's
up.
what it sounds like to me right now. But I'm so curious about it, and yeah, you should really give me some tips to start with.
Yeah, it's cool. Oh yeah, I got all kinds of ideas, but yeah, I can send you some videos off the net to show what you can do. But
Yes, please.
yeah, there's some really interesting things you can do with like acoustic instruments and electronic gear, that can really like
Yes, please.
enhance what you're doing. So I'm glad that yeah, that we had you on the show. We're gonna push this out.
Thanks
It's
for
gonna
having
be
me.
out within an hour, worldwide. Yeah, it's gonna be on 11 platforms, and we'd love to talk to you when you have that project hits fruition, and the
Yes,
one you're talking to 2021 with the Iranian musician. That would be really cool to have you come on. Maybe
that
we
would
could
be
have a
great.
call with both of you
I'll
guys.
definitely let you
That
know.
would be cool.
Let's be in touch.
Yeah, we definitely. Yeah, we'd love to have you on for that.
Thanks for
That'd be
having
cool.
me. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. We enjoyed it too. So everyone go out and hit the links we're going to put up, and support the artists that you love. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very
Thank you.
much for being on the show.